Imagine you're taking a group of kids on a woodland walk or maybe a trip down to the local riverbank. You're expecting the usual summer hazards, you know?
Right, like a scraped knee or something.
Exactly. A scraped knee, a bit of sunburn, or, I don't know, maybe a rogue wasp bothering your picnic.
Oh, the classic British summer picnic wasp.
Yeah, we all know it. But what you definitely do not expect is a 15-foot tall plant filled with a toxic sap that acts like a reverse sunscreen.
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
It does. A sap that actively strips away human skin's natural defenses and just, well, invites the sun to cause severe disfiguring burns.
It honestly sounds like something straight out of a science fiction novel, but it is very real. And frankly, is the absolute definition of a hidden botanical hazard in the UK right now.
Totally.
We like to think of our local countryside as essentially benign territory, which is exactly what makes this specific plant so uniquely dangerous.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. We've pulled together a massive stack of botanical research, medical case studies, and environmental management guidelines.
A lot of heavy reading for this one.
Oh, so much reading. But our mission today is to help you, specifically if you are a UK-based teacher, a childcare professional, or just a parent master the identification and, critically, the first aid protocols for giant hogweed.
Because while the reality of this plant is indeed frightening, what's really crucial to remember here is that knowing exactly what you are looking for completely removes the panic.
Right.
Knowing exactly what to do if an exposure happens means you were in control. We're going to give you the practical tools to handle this calmly and effectively so you can keep those kids safe.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can go out there and, protect a class of primary schoolers from this plant, we need to understand the mechanism of what we are actually dealing with.
We do.
Because from the notes we've gathered, treating this like a normal thorny weed is a massive mistake. It operates much more like a chemical weapon.
That's actually a very accurate way to frame it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you stumble into a patch of brambles, the danger is immediate and obvious.
Yeah, thorns tear the skin. You know you've hit a bramble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But giant hogweed doesn't rely on thorns or stingers. The entire thread is contained within its clear, watery sap.
And when I was reading through the research, the mechanism of this sap just blew my mind. I initially assumed it was like poison ivy.
Where the oil touches your skin and just immediately causes a rash.
Yeah. But the sap of giant hogweed is, as I said earlier, more like a reverse sunscreen. It doesn't actually burn you itself. It basically turns off your skin's UV protection and invites the sun to do the damage.
What's really fascinating here is the precise chemical choreography behind that effect. The sap contains highly toxic organic chemical compounds called furanocoumarins.
What?
Furanocoumarins, yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. But when this sap brushes against human skin, these compounds actually penetrate the cell walls.
Okay.
They travel straight into the nucleus, and they bind themselves directly to the DNA of your skin cells.
Wait, hang on. They bind to the DNA? That sounds completely terrifying. Does that mean the damage starts instantly?
Not instantly, no. And honestly, that's the insidious part. The sap itself is totally inactive in the dark.
Oh, I see.
It requires a trigger, and that trigger is ultraviolet light. So when that sap-coated skin is exposed to sunlight, or even, bright artificial UV light indoors, it sets off a condition known as phytophotodermatitis.
Phytophotodermatitis. So breaking that down, that's plant light skin inflammation.
Exactly. The UV rays activate those furanocoumarin compounds that are now bonded to your DNA.
Wow.
Once activated, they violently destroy the skin cells from the inside out, which causes massive cell death.
Wow. It's basically a booby trap just waiting for the sun to walk in.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And what's wild is how this plant even ended up on our shores to begin with. You'd think a plant this hostile was some kind of invasive stowaway on a cargo ship.
You would think so, but it was actually brought here on purpose. Yeah, it was an intentional introduction. Back in 1828, Victorian botanists traveled to the Caucasus Mountains, that really rugged region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And they brought the seeds back to Kew Gardens in London.
Just because they thought it looked cool.
Pretty much. They are utterly captivated by it. It has this massive, exotic, towering architecture. In the 19th century, having a giant hogweed in your private estate garden was like the ultimate botanical status symbol.
I mean, I guess I get the appeal of a giant exotic plant.
But there was a fatal flaw in their plan. A single giant hogweed plant produces up to 50,000 seeds.
50,000 seeds from just one plant?
Correct. And in the UK, it lacks the native pests and competitors that kept it in check back in the Caucasus.
So it just went wild.
Completely. It rapidly escaped those pristine estate gardens and aggressively colonized the British landscape. It absolutely thrives in damp soils, which is why we constantly see it taking over riverbanks, canal towpaths, and the edges of public parks.
Which brings us to the actual timeline of this reaction, because reading the sources, it is remarkably fast. If you get that sap on your skin and say, step out from the shade of the trees into the bright sun, how long do you have?
The reaction can begin in as little as 15 minutes.
Wow. That's no time at all.
No, it isn't. Initially, you might just notice some mild redness or maybe an itching sensation, but the true severity reveals itself within 24 to 48 hours.
And we aren't talking about a mild sunburn here. I mean, the photos in our research stack are frankly gruesome.
Well, they are. We are talking about the development of massive, painful, fluid-filled blisters. These are severe second or even third-degree burns. The tissue damage is profound.
I imagine that leaves a mark long after the blisters finally pop and heal up.
Yes, the long-term effects are really significant. Even after the acute blistering heals, the affected skin often develops dark purple or brown scars that can remain highly visible for years.
Years, just from brushing against a plant.
Years. Furthermore, that specific patch of skin is chemically altered. It can remain hypersensitive to sunlight for months, sometimes years, after the initial exposure. It requires constant sunblock and cover.
Okay, that paints a very clear picture of the chemical threat. But reading through the environmental data, there's a really troubling pattern that emerges.
You mean regarding who gets hurt?
Yeah. Adults definitely get hurt, obviously, but children are at a disproportionately high risk. And if you're a childcare professional or a teacher managing 20 kids on a field trip, that is the single most important dynamic to understand.
Absolutely. The risk profile shifts dramatically when we talk about pediatric exposure, and that's both behaviorally and physiologically.
Let me challenge you on the behavioral side for a second, though. If this plant grows to be 15 feet tall, how are toddlers and young kids even reaching the sap? Are they just blindly crashing into the thicket?
Well, it's a fair question. While running into a low-growing, first-year plant is definitely a risk, the more severe pediatric cases often involve the physical structure of the mature plant itself.
What do you mean?
It is, quite literally, a structural trap for a curious child. Wind and weather often snap the lower branches, or maybe council mowers break them, bringing the stems down to eye level.
The stems, yeah, the sources put a massive emphasis on the stems.
Because the stems of the giant hogweed are extremely thick, very rigid, and completely hollow inside. To a child playing outdoors, a hollow, rigid tube isn't a plant.
It's a toy.
Exactly. It's a toy. They purposefully snap them off.
The notes mention kids using them as toy swords, which means they are swinging sap-covered clubs at each other.
Yes, which is bad enough.
But there were two other examples, pea shooters and telescopes, that genuinely made my stomach drop when I read them.
It is the nightmare scenario for anyone supervising children outdoors. When a child snaps that hollow stem, the clear, watery sap pools around the jagged edges.
Oh, no.
If they hold that tube up to their eye to look through it like a telescope, those surranocunerins come into direct contact with the incredibly delicate tissues of the eye.
Which triggers phytophotodermatitis on the eyeball itself.
Exactly. The sunlight activates it instantly, leading to intense ocular inflammation, scarring of the cornea, and in severe cases, permanent blindness.
That is just horrifying. And if they use it as a pea shooter, they're putting that same sap directly onto their lips.
Which leads to severe blistering of the mouth and the sensitive mucosal tissues inside.
Yeah.
But it's not just the tragic misuse as toys.
Right.
Even a casual brush against a broken leaf is worse for a child than an adult, due to their distinct physiological vulnerabilities.
How so? I mean, isn't skin just skin?
Not quite. Children have a much thinner stratum corneum.
Stratum corneum.
Yeah, think of the stratum corneum as the outermost brick wall of your skin's defenses. Because a child's wall is thinner and less developed, the phototoxic sap doesn't just sit on the surface.
So it gets in deeper.
Much deeper. It penetrates much more rapidly and deeply into the underlying tissue than it does in a mature adult.
Ah, so the booby trap gets set much deeper in the skin. And I also read that their body proportions play a huge role in the severity.
Indeed they do. Children have a higher skin surface area to body mass ratio.
Right.
Imagine a splash of sap that covers a 3-inch patch on an adult's thigh. That's a painful nuisance, sure.
But it's localized.
Exactly. But that exact same volume of sap splashed onto a small child might cover half of their entire leg. The combination of faster penetration and greater relative coverage means the systemic stress on a child's body is significantly higher.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Since we know kids are naturally drawn to playing with the hollow tubes of these plants, and we know their skin is hyper-vulnerable, the absolute best defense is for the adult in charge to identify the threat before the children ever reach.
Without a doubt, prevention is everything here.
But identifying this plant out in the wild is like trying to spot a specific villain in a police lineup full of completely innocent bystanders.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Giant Hogweed belongs to the Opiaceae family. It's a family that includes harmless, everyday culinary plants like carrots, celery, and parsnips.
So it's related to my dinner.
It is. And out on a UK riverbank, it shares the landscape with several native botanical cousins that look incredibly similar to the untrained eye.
Right. So let's break down exactly what our listeners need to look for to spot the real villain. And I guess the most obvious clue is right there in the name. It's giant.
It truly is a behemoth. When it is fully mature and flowering in June and July, it regularly reaches 3 to 5 meters in height.
3 to 5 meters.
That is up to 15 feet tall. It towers over everything else on the footpath, and the flower heads are equally massive.
Yeah, the photos show them looking almost like giant white umbrellas.
That's right, they produce white, upward-facing umbrella-shaped clusters. Botanists call them compound umbels that can stretch 60 to 80 centimeters across.
That's an umbrella flowers over 2 feet wide. That is wild. But surely height alone isn't enough to go on.
No, it's not.
What if the plant is only in its first year of growth? From what I understand, it just forms a low rosette of leaves on the ground initially. Or what if the local council has come through with a strimmer and chopped everything back and the regrowth is stunted?
You've hit on a critical point. Relying solely on the 15-foot height is a dangerous mistake because you'll completely miss the young or damaged plants that are still highly toxic. You have to look closely at the stems.
The stems?
The stems are the absolute giveaway.
The stems are where the villain's fingerprints are, so what exactly am I looking for?
A mature giant hogweed stem is thick, often 5 to 10 centimeters in diameter, and its base color is green. But critically, it is covered in prominent purple-reddish blotches.
Let's clarify that. Are we talking about a stem that is entirely purple, or is it distinct spots?
Distinct separate blotches and speckles. It almost looks like someone flicked purple paint at a green pole.
Okay, purple paint flicks.
Furthermore, the stem is heavily textured. It is covered in coarse, white, bristly hairs. And if you look closely at the point where a leaf stalk joins the main stem, you will see a very thick, dense circle of these stiff white hairs.
Okay, so a thick green stem, distinct purple paint flick blotches, and coarse white bristles. Got it. What about the leaves? If a kid is running toward a bush, the leaves are the first thing they touch.
The leaves are monstrously large, sometimes up to 1.5 meters wide. They're deeply divided and have sharply jagged, angular pointed lobes.
Jagged lobes?
If you picture a wild rhubarb leaf, but with incredibly sharp, jagged, aggressive-looking edges, you have the right idea.
Okay, so that's the villain. But what about the innocent bystanders in our police lineup? If I'm driving to work in the spring, I see white, fluffy flowers on the road, verges absolutely everywhere. Is that all giant hogweed?
Highly unlikely. Let's compare it to its most common native lookalike, common hogweed. Common hogweed is totally safe, but it causes a lot of false alarms. First, it's much smaller, rarely exceeding 2 meters. Its leaves are moderately sized with softer, rounded lobes, not those aggressive, sharp, jagged edges.
And the stem, does it have the purple fingerprints?
It does not. The stem of common hogweed might have a continuous solid purple hue or long purple stripes running up it, but it lacks those distinct, separate purple-red blotches.
So stripes are solid color, but no paint flick.
Exactly. And instead of sharp, coarse bristles, it is covered in soft, downy, almost velvety hairs.
And what about cow parsley? Because that's the one I feel like I see carpeting the sides of footpaths everywhere.
Cow parsley is even smaller and more delicate, usually sitting at about 1 to 1.5 meters tall. Its leaves are highly divided, looking very much like delicate ferns.
Which is totally different from the massive rhubarb-like leaves of giant hogweed.
Completely different. Its stems are slender, green, grooved, and completely lack any purple spots whatsoever. It also tends to flower much earlier in the spring, well before the giant hogweed reaches its massive summer peak.
So the takeaway for our listeners managing a group outdoors. You are scanning for the massive plant with the purple-spotted bristly stems and the jagged rhubarb leaves.
That's the one.
If you spot that combination, you calmly steer the group in the opposite direction and report the location to the local council.
Precisely. Early identification prevents the exposure entirely.
But let's live in the real world for a second. Accidents happen. You're on a school trip, you're tying one kid's shoelace, and another child wanders 2 steps off.
It happens so fast.
They brush against a broken stalk and suddenly complain of a stinging sensation. Or maybe you notice a clear wet patch of sap on their forearm. What are the exact step-by-step first aid protocols? Because the sources are very clear that what you do in the first few minutes dictates whether this becomes a minor irritation or a hospital visit.
Time is absolutely of the essence. The furanocoumarins are beginning to penetrate the skin, and you must act quickly. But you must act correctly.
Well, let me tell you what my immediate panicked instinct would be.
Okay, what would you do?
If a kid gets a toxic chemical on them, my brain says, get them to a sink, get some warm soapy water, and scrub the absolute life out of that arm to get the chemical off.
Right.
But reading our notes, if I did that, I'd be making a massive mistake. Why?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of human physiology, we can understand why that well-meaning instinct is actually incredibly dangerous in this specific scenario. Think about what happens to your skin in a hot shower.
It gets red.
Yes, because warm water causes vasodilation. It actively dilates your blood vessels, increases circulation to the surface, and opens up your pores.
No, so by using warm water, I'm literally opening the gates for the toxin.
Exactly. If you use warm water, you dramatically speed up the skin's absorption rate. You're pulling those furanocoumarin toxins deeper into the cellular tissue before the soap even has a chance to wash them away.
Okay, that makes total sense. So no warm water. And I'm guessing my instinct to scrub is equally bad.
Scrubbing is disastrous.
Yeah.
The sap is a clear, invisible liquid. If you take a rough towel and scrub the child's arm, all you are doing is smearing that concentrated toxin over a much wider surface area of their skin.
Oh.
You are literally expanding the burn zone.
So what is the actual protocol? What do I do?
Before you even think about water, step 1 is immediate shade.
Shade? Right, because of the UV trigger.
Remember, this is a phototoxin. The chemical reaction cannot start without ultraviolet light. The very first thing you must do is physically block the UV light. Move the child under a dense canopy of trees, take them indoors, or cover the exposed area with a jacket or a thick blanket. You stop the trigger, you stop the burn.
So get them into the shade immediately. Then what about washing?
Once they are shielded from the light, use a paper towel or a soft cloth to gently blot the sap off. Blot, do not rub.
Blot, don't rub. Got it.
Then wash the area thoroughly with soap and copious amounts of cold or cool water. The cold water does the opposite of warm water. It constricts the blood vessels and closes the pores, helping to keep the toxin on the surface so the soap can lift it away.
Cold water and soap, that's so crucial to remember. But what if we encounter that nightmare scenario from earlier and the child got the sap in or near their eyes?
That is an immediate medical emergency. If there is ocular exposure, you must flush the eyes with clean, fresh water for a strict minimum of 10 minutes.
10 whole minutes.
Yes. Then you must put dark UV-blocking sunglasses on the child instantly to protect their retinas from the light trigger and seek emergency hospital care without delay.
Okay, let's say it was just a skin exposure on the arm. You got them into the shade, blotted the sap, washed it with cold, soapy water. Disaster averted, right? We can go back out and play?
Absolutely not.
Really?
You are now entering the crucial 48-hour observation window. Even with thorough washing, some microscopic trace amounts of the toxin may have already penetrated the stratum corneum.
Right, because kids' skin is so thin.
Therefore, the affected skin must be kept completely covered and protected from all sunlight and even bright artificial UV light indoors for a strict minimum of 48 hours.
That means long sleeves, bandages, and basically keeping them inside.
Yes. Any premature exposure to sunlight within those 2 days can still trigger delayed, severe blistering.
And what about the clothes they were wearing when they brushed the plant?
You must handle contaminated clothing like hazardous waste. Do not pull a sap-stained t-shirt off by dragging it upward over the child's face.
Because you just smear the sap onto their cheeks and eyes.
Exactly. If necessary, carefully cut the clothing off. Then wash those garments completely separately from the rest of the laundry, using hot water and strong detergent to break down the toxic oils.
And finally, if despite all your best efforts, you start seeing those fluid-filled blisters forming the next day, I'm assuming we don't just pop them and put a plaster over it.
Never puncture the blisters. Puncturing them removes the sterile biological barrier and invites severe secondary bacterial infections, which can be just as dangerous as the burn itself.
Good to know.
If blisters appear, or if you are at all concerned about the child's reaction, you must seek professional medical advice. In the UK, that means contacting your local GP, calling NHS 101 for guidance, or taking the child straight to an A&E department.
So what does this all mean? To synthesize everything we've unpacked today, the UK countryside is a wonderful, essential place for children to learn and explore. But giant hogweed is a genuine hazard that demands immense respect.
It really does.
However, you are now equipped to mitigate that hazard. By knowing how to actively scan for those thick, purple-blotched stems and jagged leaves, and by memorizing the golden rule of immediate shade and cold water, teachers and parents can ensure their kids stay protected.
It's all about proactive awareness. But, this whole deep dive raises an important question about how we manage this threat on a macro scale in the future. I want to leave you with a rather fascinating detail buried deep in the environmental management sources.
I love.
While this phenocoumarin sap is utterly devastating to human DNA and human skin, certain animals, specifically sheep, goats, and pigs, possess a biological immunity.
Wait, really?
Yes, they can actually graze on mature giant hogweed all day long without suffering a single blister.
They just eat the chemical weapon.
They devour it happily, which presents a brilliant ecological scenario. Right now, UK councils are battling to control this invasive species using heavy machinery and hazardous chemical herbicides, which carry their own massive risks for council workers and the surrounding environment.
Sure, spraying chemicals near a school is never ideal.
Right. So could the future of safe land management near our schools, parks, and towpaths involve a biological solution? Could we soon see the deployment of targeted urban herds of grazing pigs brought in specifically to safely eat the problem away?
Now, that is a brilliant image to end on. Imagine a herd of council-employed pigs happily clearing out the riverbank right next to the primary school playground.
It would certainly be effective.
It's definitely something to mull over the next time you're planning that woodland walk. Remember, the outdoors is yours to enjoy, but knowing exactly what's hiding in the greenery is what keeps a great day out from turning into a medical emergency. Stay curious and stay safe out there.